Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we've got more Duskmourn spoilers, new combos, new synergies. I'm calling this day 7. I don't know, we didn't get too much over the weekend, but we got a bunch today. Let's jump right into it. The Tale of Tomo, which is a 3-mana legendary enchantment saga. I think the only legendary saga that we've ever gotten with 4 chapters. The first 3 are all the same. Mill 2 cards. If 2 cards that you milled share a card type, you draw a card and then repeat this process. What an interesting ability. Certainly a unique ability, not something we've really ever gotten. Maybe kind of like Grindstone is similar, but those have to like share a color. But these have to share a card type. The last mode, chapter 4 here, is that exile any number of target instant sorceries and or Tamio planeswalker cards from your graveyard. Copy them, and you can cast any number of the copies. So this could just kind of be a value engine on level 1 where you're just kind of milling a few cards, right? Up to 6 cards in the first chapter, could be more, and then you're kind of able to flashback some of your instants and sorceries. You know, 3 turns later, 4 turns later, whatever that may be with the Tale of Tamio. So that seems like okay, decent value to just be able to flashback a few things, maybe mill some stuff. However, like this first ability, I was trying to think of what would be ways to really kind of use this card to its maximum potential, where you could mill a bunch of cards and draw a bunch of cards and repeat this process. The phrase "repeat this process" is a really interesting one when they print that on a card. So you want to figure out how you can kind of be able to do that. In standard, there's an interesting card, the Head Shredder. So that card you also kind of want to maybe potentially build your deck with tons of lands in play. So this is an interesting deck building challenge card. That if you have a bunch of lands in your deck, this could potentially mill 2 lands, and then you draw another card, and then you mill 2 lands, draw another card, mill 2 lands, draw another card, mill 2 lands, draw another card. If you had the Head Shredder out, when you're doing that, all those lands that you're milling actually come into play as well. So you're kind of getting a ton of mana, and any come into play abilities from those lands you're also getting. So that could be an interesting kind of 1-2 combo there. Maybe there's lands that do damage or scry or whatever when they come into play. So you kind of get those abilities going as a standard brew. In older formats, actually, we also in standard have the encroaching mycosense. So that is the standard legal card too, because that says all non-land permanents you control are artifacts in addition to other types, and the same is true for permanent spells you control and non-land permanent cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. So basically, it makes everything an artifact, so that would share a type and would make other Tales of Tamios into artifacts as well. So every non-land permanent. Of course, you have to have some lands in your deck. In standard, at least, you could play with that with like modal double-faced cards, and then your entire deck would be permanents, and then you can mill your entire deck if you had those 2 cards going. What that would do, there's some formats you can kind of win the game immediately once you mill your whole deck. With, for example, Narcomoeba. I was also thinking maybe this could be good in Dredge. Maybe, I don't know. People who play Dredge, let me know in the comments below if this would actually be good in Dredge, because there's a lot of most of the Dredge cards are creatures, and most of the payoffs from that deck, like Prize Amalgam, Narcomoeba, Bloodghast, are all creatures as well. So you could play this and maybe mill a bunch, and then also when you get to draw a card, you can replace that draw with a Dredge, right? So that could potentially really mill a big portion of your deck if you play the Tale of Tamio. You'd have to get, I guess, somewhat lucky, right? But if you get 2 lands, you could also repeat the process as well. And then maybe Seismic Assault with a deck with a ton of lands. If you had Seismic Assault and then you played this, just because you get to draw a card every time you're repeating the process. So if you if you did this process like uh, 10 times, you would just win the game immediately to do 20 to your opponent. So maybe there's some interesting combo potential there. This is a really interesting card. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I feel like there's some ways to sort of definitely break this ability. But again, like it itself being a legendary enchantment means you're probably going to have to stop this unless it's the only card in your deck, the only copy of it in that case. I don't know. It's certainly an interesting one, but there's also just like the value potential of milling a bunch of cards and drawing some cards too, and not really trying to combo off that much with it. But I'm gonna enjoy brewing around this card. I think for standard and maybe some older formats as well. All right, next up we've got the namesake of this whole set. Finally get Nashi, the Searcher in the Dark, which is a Dimir blue-black 2/2 rat ninja wizard. So a lot of types that could matter. It's also a legend, and it has menace. And when Nashi deals combat damage to a player, you mill that many cards, and then you put any number of legendary and or enchantment cards from among them into your hand. And if you put no cards in your hand, you put a +1/+1 counter. So that's kind of nice fail safe on Nashi, and the kind of +1/+1 counter can kind of snowball, because then the next turn, if you get in, it does 3 damage, and then you're milling that much more. So, you could also like play this with pump spells and then mill even more cards potentially. Not really sure that's what you want to do with this. But I was thinking, okay, there's a lot of legends that are quite playable in standard, and there's also like a rat legend, Harmonix, which is quite good with Nashi because it is a rat, and so they kind of go hand in hand. The Harmonix could help find the Nashi and then give it toxic as well, and the Nashi can also find the Harmonix because it's a legend. So Nashi can find more copies of itself because it's a legend. So that's kind of nice. There's obviously a lot of enchantments coming to standard as well. So there's enchantment lands and tons of enchantment creatures, things like that. So there's certainly that use. It's also a ninja, so the new Kaido kind of has another ninja to go with it, which the emblem of on Kaido is quite powerful. And so having a bunch of ninjas, playable ninjas, is certainly useful. And Kaido itself is a legend, so you could find the Kaido off of Nashi. Maybe with Insidious Roots could be kind of cool because of the milling, and then you mill them and then you return them to your hand. So that could trigger Insidious Roots for each um, creature or legendary creature, enchantment creature that you're returning here. So I think Nashi's could be somewhat playable. You do have to get in and hit to have its ability trigger. Just a 2-mana 2/2 is obviously not that great. With Menace is okay. There's a little bit of evasion, so that's good. But the ability is powerful, I would say. Even if you were just hitting one card each time, just drawing a card every turn for just 2 mana, 2/2 Menace. That's a pretty powerful card, I would say. So you do kind of have to build your deck with it in mind, of course, to make sure you have legendaries, enchantments that you're going to hit. But then even if you don't hit, you kind of are getting more counters off of it and then milling even more. So, can enable Delirium as well, of course, which is a good thing for this set. So a lot of interesting kind of synergy potential with Nashi here. All right, let's move on to the important Oculus, which is a blue 3-mana 5/5. It is an eye creature. Look at this giant eye coming at this guy. Pretty scary. And it says an additional cost to cast it, exile 6 cards from your graveyard. It's got flying. And it says at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Manifest Dread. So Manifest Dread, if you're not aware of what that does, put the top 2 cards you look at the top 2 cards and you can choose one and put it as a face down 2/2 creature, and then you can turn it face up anytime for its mana cost, and then the other one goes into your graveyard. So it does kind of fill the graveyard here. The question is sort of like, how do you get around this 6 cards in your graveyard? It's not impossible to do this in standard, by the way. Like you could, there are fetch lands and there are cards that just mill a bunch of cards. Or 2 mana. There's that fairy that has the ability to mill 4 cards for 2 mana, and there's like 1-drops that can mill 2 cards for 1 mana. So you certainly can get to 6 cards in your graveyard on turn 3. That's not impossible. However, I think maybe the best use for this guy is to try to mill itself and then bring it back with Helping Hand, or there's other cards that bring back creatures with mana value 3 or less directly to your graveyard, because you're already trying to mill cards with this guy in your deck. And also the Manifest Dread ability itself is sort of a milling ability as well. So having cards like Helping Hand uh, can help you find more of these copies of this card or other cards you want to bring back with Helping Hand. So that's pretty nice synergy there. There's kind of like a blue-white Helping Hand mentor kind of deck already. So this card could maybe go into that sort of strategy. And then I was thinking, well, would also be a pretty sweet card to copy as well, because then if you copy it, you don't actually have to do the additional cost. So like Mockingbird, if this is already in play, and you made another copy of it with Mockingbird for 3 mana, or with the Silent Hall Creeper for just 2 mana to copy this, that's pretty strong as well. This card seems pretty strong, and definitely could see it seeing some play in constructed and standard, maybe some older formats as well, because it's much easier to get like 6 cards with fetch lands, good fetch lands anyways, in older formats, and just like 0 mana artifacts that can go to your graveyard. It's pretty easy to get up to 6 cards in your graveyard to play this on curve. So yeah, I think this is definitely a tournament card for sure, and pretty powerful. Okay, next up we've got Valgavoth's Onslaught, which is a double X and green sorcery. And it says manifest dread X times, and put X +1/+1 counters on each of those creatures. So again, manifest dread, you get to look at the top two, choose one, put it as a 2/2 creature, and the other one goes to the graveyard. There's a lot of sort of manifest dread synergies that they're printed in this set. We'll see if there's any more as the set continues to get spoiled. Should be spoiled by the end of the week. So again, this card could be better or worse depending on if there's more sort of payoffs. But the one we have now that I think is quite good with this is the threats around every corner. Because what you really want to do with this card is that you want to try to get as many X mana with it as possible. So if you just think about what it does, it's 3 mana. You get a 2/2 plus a +1/+1 counter, so 3 mana for 3/3. Yeah, not great. You do kind of get some card selection and a card in the graveyard, so that could be good for like Delirium or something like that. So that's okay. But on 5 mana, it's pretty good because now you're getting 2/2s, which each have 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So 2 4/4s essentially for 5 mana, which is a pretty good deal. And then as it scales up for 7 mana, you're getting three. You're getting 3 5/5s, right? So that's a lot of power for 7 mana. 15 power for 7 mana. So not bad. So you definitely want to have as much mana in play with this as you can. And then threats around every corner says when it comes to play, you manifest dread, and whenever a face down permanent you control enters, search your library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So it's ramping you up so you can cast more Valgavoth's Onslaughts. And then when you cast another Valgavoth's Onslaught, if you say do it for 3, you're going to trigger the threats around corner 3 times, and you get 3 more lands. And then if you have another one, it's going to be even bigger and just create this huge board. So maybe there's some manifest dread combo potential there. The Ozolith, which cares about +1/+1 counters, could be nice with this because you're putting a +1/+1 counter or multiple ones on each creature, so that could add more counters. And then maybe even with having it all be one out and then you casting this, for example, even if you're casting this for 7 mana, you're getting 9 +1/+1 counters on things all at the same time. And then I think you can distribute up. It would be 3, 3, and 3, and you could kind of target different things with all be one. So maybe there's some potential there. Yeah, an interesting card. Let me know what you guys think about this one. I think it has like a shot at maybe seeing constructed play and kind of cool with threats around every corner, and maybe there's other manifest dread synergies I'm not quite thinking about, but yeah, definitely an interesting, cool card for sure. Okay, next up we've got another new room card, the private office in the lecture hall. So on the left here, the white private office is whenever you unlock the room, destroy all creatures of power 3 or greater. And the lecture hall is 7 mana. All other permanents you control have hexproof. So an interesting one. It's sort of a wrath mass destruction effect that we're getting here on a enchantment room. So there are synergies with rooms. There are cards that which I'll show later, which unlock rooms for free essentially, or give you mana to only spend on rooms. So those could kind of synergize with this. If you're kind of in that room strategy deck, there's a card that I think if you unlock enough rooms, you win the game, something like that. So you could play it in some room strategies. But I was kind of thinking, what are the other kind of combos? I mean, on level 1, I think the left side is always going to be played the most as sort of hopefully a one-sided wrath if you're just playing a bunch of 1/1s or two power creatures. Playing that and then destroying all your opponent's bigger creatures could be kind of good as like a sideboard card or something like that. It's also an enchantment, so nurturing pixie or other cards that could bounce it back to your hand could replay it, and then you could kind of get the wrath effect multiple times. So that could be kind of interesting. And then giving all your permanents hexproof. That's like I think that's kind of tacked on here. Like that's really expensive just to have that effect, which is a powerful effect to be fair, but not something I think you would just want to play for 7 mana. But maybe in older formats with like Platinum Angel or something like that in Commander, Platinum Angel, and you have Lecture Hall going, then you can kind of lock your opponents out of the game. maybe something like that I was thinking could be decent. But yeah, an interesting card for sure. Having a wrath effect on an reusable enchantment, I think, is maybe the most interesting part about this card to me, anyways. Okay, next up we've got another room, which is the charred foyer and the warped space, which is 4 mana on the left side. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You can play it this turn, and then on the right side, the warp space, 6 mana for once each turn. You can pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast from exile. So interesting card. And again, there are like the ghostly key bearer is kind of the one that they've given us that can unlock rooms basically for free. So with this, or maybe the lecture hall, that could be a way to kind of get that unlocked essentially for free. I don't know if that's quite good enough, but it is an option, something to think about. The abilities on this card specifically, on the left side, sort of like the exile, the upkeep effect. Maybe Obeka would want this, or the Rocco would be decent with this card as well because it exiles stuff and lets you cast things from exile. So the warp space could let you cast things for exile for free. This card doesn't seem like great for constructed for 60 card formats. Maybe it's more of a commander card, which is cool, but yeah, just the mana efficiency isn't great, and having to the warp space, I would say, if this was like you can cast anything from your hand from free, that would be nice, but it has to be in exile, so you have to kind of have enough effects and have the card in exile for it to sort of be worth it. Of course, the left side works with the right side, but neither side is, in my opinion, doesn't seem particularly worth it. So, yeah, let me know if maybe I'm missing something with this card, but it seems a little too expensive for what it's doing. All right, next up we got this good boy, the Enduring Courage, which is a 4 mana enchantment creature, Dog Glimmer. So this is the red. There's a cycle of all of these. This is the red version. And whenever another creature you control enters, it gets +2/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. And then if it dies, if it was a creature, you can return it back to the battlefield as an enchantment and not a creature. So this is a pretty cool effect on a card like this because there has been other cards. There was like a card that I think that did exactly this. It was um, like Ogre Taskmaster, I think it was called. Can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a 4 mana 3/3 that kind of had this same ability whenever the creature comes into play. But that card would just you play it and then it would just die to removal, and then you wouldn't ever get to do your cool combos with it. So this card definitely gives you a chance. I mean, you can play it. You can block and trade off with one of their creatures, maybe, or if it dies to removal, it still comes back and you still get its effect. So you're really kind of playing this for its effect, of course, giving things haste and pumping their attack. And there's actually some cards in standard that you would really want to do this to. A couple weeks ago, I made a Dragonhawk Rotten Math Viper deck that kind of gave them both haste and doubled their triggers and kind of did all that stuff. This card would definitely see play in that sort of shell. So yeah, the Dragonhawk is really good to give it haste and attack and swinging for 7 right away, and then getting extra triggers off of it. It's pretty powerful for sure. Could be a game-winning play. Also, the Rotten Math Viper, you really want to give it haste. Kind of cute with the Rotten Math Viper too, in that if you sacrifice this to the Rotten Math Viper as a creature, it'll come back as an enchantment and you'll still get the effect. So if you needed the extra mana for the Viper, you could kind of do that. It kind of could, curve into each other. Uh, so you could sacrifice it to play it for 5 mana, but you could also sacrifice other permanents as well. But again, giving the Viper haste is quite good to get multiple triggers, and also Roxanne, quite good to give haste, multiple triggers in the same turn. So this card is pretty cool. Maybe some fringe constructed play. Maybe it's part of some other combos where you're putting some creatures into play and giving them haste. Could be decent in like a token strategy potentially, because each token that comes into play would get this pump. So maybe there's that. It's 4 mana, so it's a little expensive, but definitely want to keep an eye off for this guy and see what other synergies it might have for sure. Okay, next up we've got some uncommons, some pretty powerful uncommons in this set for sure. This one I think is quite strong actually. The Fear of Being Hunted is a 3 mana 4/2 enchantment creature nightmare with haste, and it says it must be blocked if able, which is a very interesting line of text, and you don't really see that on cards anymore. They used to be on some cards like lure effects that made you block, but I don't know the last time they printed that line of text on a card. I can't really even remember, but that is definitely a powerful ability because it can give you card advantage to essentially make your opponent force them to block if this card would not trade with that creature, essentially. Um, and this has haste, so you can kind of do it right away. It's a pretty decent card on its own. A 3-mana 4/2 haste is like a nice uh, sort of beatdown card for sure. You may play that anyways, but it can do some pretty strong stuff if you're able to either kill off your opponent's creature with it right away, or kind of continually buff this creature. So there's a few things. You could use the Innkeeper's Talent to, if you played that on 2 and you played this on 3, then you give this a +1/+1 counter. Then let's say they had a 2-power or a 2/2 back that they just played. Swing in, just kill their 2/2 right away, force them to block, and then the next turn, if they don't have an answer to this or creature to it, put another +1/+1 counter on it, and then it would have it would be a 6/4, and then it could, if they played another creature, you could attack and kill it. So some interesting stuff with Inti. Also puts +1/+1 counters could potentially each turn, and give it trample, which would be kind of good because say in that example they have a 2/2 out. Um, you have Inti, you play this, you attack, you give it a +1/+1 counter and trample. They're forced to block, but then they would also take 3 damage as well as losing their creature. So that would be pretty sweet. We've got the Ethereal Armor, which might be a pretty sweet target for this as well, because then no matter how many creatures they line up to block, would be very, very hard to block this. Just on its own, if you didn't have any other enchantments, that would be a +2/+2 in first strike, so it would be a 6/4 first strike, which is very hard to block, but this forces them to block. When Landwar Elves comes to standard, or kind of already in Pioneer, maybe this is quite good. Like, imagine you're playing, if you're on the play against another deck, you go turn 1 Landwar Elves, they go turn 1, I don't know, there's a lot of like 1/2 creatures or another, let's say they play a Landwar Elf themselves, and then you go turn 2, Fear of Being Hunted, attack, force you to block, kill your guy right away. That's just like a 2-for-1 at least right away, and then if they don't have anything else, or they play 2 guys and they are forced to double block. I know it doesn't force them to double block, but if they wanted to trade off, they might have to. But or you just remove, they play 2 guys and then you shock one of their other guys and then you attack and they have to block with the other one. It's like this card can really create some pretty bad board states for your opponent if they don't have a removal for it. It is, dice removal, of course. But again, if you can like pump it up or give it like some sort of protection with Innkeeper's Talent and Ward, or just pump its toughness, this card can kind of take over a game completely by itself. So I know it seems kind of innocuous, and maybe I'm hyping this card up a little too much, but I think it's quite strong and has potential to see some constructed play. Okay, next up we've got Glimmer Burst, which is a common, a 4-mana instant, draw 2 cards and create a 1/1 white Glimmer enchantment creature token, and also the Glimmer Light, which is a 2-mana equipment, and you also create a 1/1 Glimmer, and you can equip it for 1 creatures +1/+1. This card is only notable because some of jank combo with Chaotic Transformation. Creating enchantment tokens is always interesting if they print something, a good enchantment that you want to target with Chaotic Transformation or have in your deck for Chaotic Transformation, then this could potentially, be a use for having a enchantment token. So that's basically the only use I could see this. It does trigger all the other enchantment stuff, but could be fun in a transformation deck. Okay, next up we've got the Oblivious Bookworm, which is a 2-mana green and blue for a 2/3 human wizard, and at the beginning of your end step, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card unless a permanent card entered the battlefield face down under your control this turn, or you turn a permanent face up this turn. So again, manifesting dread cards would work with this as well, to ensure you don't have to discard. Also, like Cryptic Code is kind of cool with it, because it also is creating cloak card, which is a face down card, and then if you flip them up, you also don't have to discard. However, maybe you want to discard with this card too. This is a very strong looter, in my opinion, because first of all, it's a 2/3, which is pretty nice for stats for a looter, and at the beginning of your end step, you get to trigger this. So the turn you play it, if they don't remove it right away, you get to have its ability trigger, which is different than a looter. You have to usually wait a turn cycle and then be able to tap it to get the draw discard ability. And then you don't actually have to tap it during your turn. You can attack with it during your turn and still get the ability at the end of your turn. So this is a very strong looting effect, in my opinion. Maybe with something like Reenact the Crime decks, you would want this because you can still cast that as an instant during your end step to reanimate the card that you discarded, or just any deck that would want a looting effect. I think this card is definitely a consideration for that deck because it is certainly decent stats and gets you the ability right away, and you can do it every turn without paying any mana. So, or even have to tap it. All right. Next up, we've got the Wildfire Wickerfolk, which is a green and a red for a artifact creature scarecrow 3/2 with haste and delirium, and it gets +1/+1 and trample if you have 4 or more card types. So what a power creep card! This card is quite good. They used to print 2 mana 2/2s for haste, and people thought those were pretty good. So this is an extra power here and an artifact, which could work with artifact synergies such as Teething Wormlet, Goblin Tomb Raider. There's a lot of, artifact matters potential cards that could go nicely with this, but I thought those were pretty good kind of curves. Like if you want turn 1, Teething Wormlet, turn 2, trigger, and then attack for 5. Also the Tomb Raider, attack for 5. And then any additional Tomb Raiders you play would also have haste. It's not impossible to get Delirium online on turn 2. For example, if you played Rebel Belt Maverick and you had to get lucky, of course. But if you had an artifact creature and an enchantment land on top of your deck, that would give you Delirium on turn 1, essentially. And then turn 2, you could play this and attack with Delirium. So if this has a Delirium, it's even stronger. So yeah, I don't know. I think this guy's got a shot at constructed. There's a lot of really powerful, aggressive red strategies already. I don't know if this is any better than those, but could be pretty good. Maybe in like a budget deck as well. Could be a cool build around. But yeah, definitely awesome and limited, of course. But I think it has some potential for constructed. Okay, next up we've got the Rite of the Moth, which is a 4-mana white and black sorcery. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So if it dies, you exile instead. And then also has flashback for 6 mana. So you can cast this twice and reanimate 2 things. It's also quite notable that this is a 4-mana reanimation spell, which I think there's only one other one available in standard now, and you have to lose life equal to the creature's mana cost, so that can be kind of a big downside with that one. And this one is kind of unconditional and even gives you an upside of being able to cast it with flashback. So also if you mill this into your graveyard, it kind of gives you extra value to be able to flash it back. And you also mill a big creature. So that is, on Burial Rites is kind of the card that's similar to this. I don't know if it's quite as good as that because the flashback cost is a little bit more, but the initial cost being 4 is quite good. And could spur some sort of reanimation strategies. I mean, we've got Traxa, Galta, all sorts of big cards, a tally that you would want to reanimate in standard. So yeah, I mean, kind of a straightforward card. You do have to play the 2 colors, black and white, to cast this. So the casting cost, I guess, is kind of the downside of it. But both those colors have ways of getting cards into your graveyard and discarding cards. So that's not too big of an issue, I would think. But yeah, I think this also has some constructive potential for sure. Okay, next up we've got Arabella the Abandoned Doll, which is a red and a white for a legendary artifact creature toy, a 1/3. And when it attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. So maybe this is more of a commander card because it's a legend and does each opponent, so that's kind of cool. But I was just thinking in constructed there. I mean, if you just curve this into Delny, that would be pretty sweet, right? Because turn 2, play this. Turn 3, play Delny, attack. So now you have 2 creatures with power 2 or less, right? So this would trigger for 2 damage twice. So that would be hit them for 4 and gain 4 right away. Let's say you had a 1-drop as well that was like a 1 mana 1/1 and you attacked. Then this would be drain them for 6, basically, on turn 3. So pretty cool potential. It also could potentially, Delny gives it a little bit of evasion. So kind of a nice 1-2 punch there. Also pretty good with token strategies as well, like Lethal Demolition, hop to it. Maybe this goes in the red-white token deck. Maybe, I don't know. There are, quite a few cards in the creatures in that deck that have power 2 or less. So um, yeah, definitely some interesting potential with Arabella. Pretty powerful 2-drop in my opinion. Okay, next up we've got some more uncommons here. The Grand Entryway and the Elegant Rotunda. Is that an uncommon? I think it's uncommon. Maybe it's a common. I can't really tell by the symbol there. But either way, it's not a rare, and it's a room card. So one of the cheaper rooms that we've gotten, and decent that it kind of curves into itself, which is kind of cool. And so it says on the left side, 2 mana for when you unlock it, you get a 1/1 white glimmer enchantment. And then on the right, when you unlock it, you put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. So, decent abilities and kind of okay on its own, but quite good, well, quite notable, I would say, with a few cards. Another new card that we got, which is the Optimistic Scavenger, which is quite good. A 1 mana 1/1 Human Scout, and it has Eerie whenever enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So that's pretty good. There was a green creature. Gosh, what's the name? That did something similar. I think it was whenever you cast an enchantment, you got that ability. So, and that's a lot of constructed play. And we're getting a lot of enchantments. And this, the Optimistic Scavenger also works with enchantment tokens, or any sort of enchantment that comes into play. The enchantment land would trigger the Optimistic Scavenger as well, or roll tokens would trigger it. So there's a lot of synergies there, but the Grand Entryway putting it's 2 mana to put 2 enchantments into play at the same time, which is notable for the Scavenger, for other Eerie abilities, for Victor, um, which wants you to kind of have 3 basically come into play at the same turn to really maximize its abilities. And then, so let's just say you went turn 1 Optimistic Scavenger, turn 2 you played this. Now you have a 3/3, or you could distribute the counters however you wanted to. And then turn 3 you unlock the Elegant Rotunda. That would also trigger the Eerie because it's whenever you unlock a room, you get that +1/+1 counter, and then this you could distribute the +1/+1 counters onto both of those. So that would be kind of nice curve you got between those cards. So yeah, this by itself too could, on turn 5, could enable all the Eerie abilities, 3 Eerie abilities by itself, because you could play it. It would give you an enchantment, and then pay the 3 mana to unlock the other side, which also triggers Eerie. So definitely a cool card that synergizes really well with different Eerie effects. And then last up, we've got some infinite combo potential on Jank. This card actually is also quite good. I think could potentially see play in an Eerie deck. It's Gremlin Tamer, the 2 mana, blue and white, and it is a 2/2, and it says whenever enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, create a 1/1 red Gremlin creature token. So I think potentially could synergize in this whole Eerie shell here as well, but I wanted to leave you with an infinite combo just because why not? That's always fun. Enchanted Evening, this is not a standard combo, but in older formats is legal. If you play that, you get infinite 1/1 red Gremlin creature tokens. Because what happens is you have the Gremlin Tamer, you play Enchanted Evening. Actually, if you had them other way around, it works too. But playing the Enchanted Evening triggers the Eerie, and then you get a 1/1 red Gremlin creature token. However, that Gremlin token is now also an enchantment because of Enchanted Evening. That triggers the Eerie, which triggers getting a 1/1 Gremlin, which triggers the Eerie, which triggers and you go infinite. You have to have some way to stop this, or something that kills your opponent as you trigger this. Some effect that does damage to your opponent when a creature comes to play, or just like a Goblin Bombardment as a way to sacrifice all these gremlins that you're getting from these abilities to actually kill your opponent. Otherwise, it's like an infinite loop, an unbounded loop, I think is what it's called. And the game, I think, just results in a draw if you play those. So don't do that. But have a way to convert that into a win, technically. So that is the infinite combo I will leave with today. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you are enjoying these spoiler videos. Again, let me know in the comments any cool ideas with these new cards, any cool decks that you're brewing with Duskmourn. Again, it looks like a really fun set. I will be having, when it comes out on Arena, a bunch of new brews, mostly standard combos here on the channel, and stay tuned for some more as we finish out the set review for the set and some more infinite combo videos and things like that. So hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.